Hi, it's Steve, and I'm here with Gwyneth Murray-Nolan. Gwyneth, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. So I'm asking you to appear as a freedom fighter in our gallery, and I'm wondering, what does freedom mean to you? Can you give us an idea?
Sure. To me, freedom is the ability for everyone to have their own opinion without being attacked for that opinion. For people to be able to apply the ideals of our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence freely and without having to justify the reasons for doing so. And go ahead, Steve.
It sounds like you've had experience with just the opposite. It sounds like you've had some difficulty doing so. Tell us about what happened.
This is certainly true. For me, my fight towards freedom began um, during the pandemic when my two children were forcibly masked in school. My older son is on the autism spectrum. He also has sensory processing disorder and ADHD. And for him to be masked means that he can't read other people's expressions, he can't use his own expression, and it interferes with his emotional ability to censor his emotions and to react. Also, with his sensory processing, having a mask on his face was giving him some very specific issues with his speech and his learning ability and his emotional regulation. Often people with autism have emotional dysregulation, meaning that they can't regulate their emotions in the same capacity as other people who don't have the same neurological difficulties. So from the outset, in September 2020, when my children first went back to school, I requested that my son, under his IEP, which is a legal document, that he not be masked in school. And I was met with resistance right from the beginning. My other son at the time, my younger son, was in kindergarten, and he was also masked. He is diagnosed with anxiety and with ADHD. Now, I wasn't as concerned with my younger son at the time. I was more focused on my older son because of his autism spectrum. As the year went on, I spoke to my principal of my school, which is where I was directed first, the school nurse. I spoke to the superintendent of our school district, and I went to every single Board of Education meeting from the time my school district was back in person, which started in July when we were back in person. Every single meeting that I went to unmasked myself. And this was because my specific request from my superintendent and the Board of Education was that they take action for special needs children to be unmasked. And at the local level, that is the job of the superintendent and the Board of Education, to make local decisions. And they were touting the Murphy mask mandate in schools. But at the local level, they have the power, the Board of Education and the superintendent, to make decisions to protect individual children. And my specific request was that my superintendent, who is paid by my tax dollars and by my school district, and the Board of Education, who is elected by the taxpayers in my town and by a vote in the town, that they take action to protect medically fragile children and special needs children. We're not talking about the entire population here. I'm not asking them to unmask people who don't want to be who want to be masked in school, but it's a choice. And the choice specifically is to protect those most fragile children who couldn't learn or had emotional dysregulation issues and other issues due to their special needs, like my children. Now we fast forward to March of 2021, and at this point, I had made I had been asked to speak in front of the New Jersey State Senate on the issues with masking children in school. I had also spoken to a special counsel by the New Jersey State Republicans regarding issues with masking children in school. So I feel like I had taken every single possible path that was necessary for me to protect my kids and do what I was supposed to do to protect my children. My son, my younger son, had developed bleeding mouth sores in his mouth as a result of licking the inside of his mask because he was 5. And what do 5-year-olds do? I mean, the problem with these masks is that they were being dropped on the floor and kids are picking them back up, and they're not sanitary, and they're not doing the job that everyone, from the CDC onward said they were supposed to do. Oh, they're keeping out COVID. Everyone knows a cloth mask wasn't doing that. And there's study after study at this point as we escalate through the school year of 2020 to 2021, and the kids are still masked. So my son developed 8 bleeding mouth sores in his lips and inside his cheeks. And within 4 days, my 5-year-old lost 10% of his body weight and had a pediatrician's note saying he shouldn't wear a mask for 3 to 5 days. This is ignored by my school district. And I am at this point now infuriated. I am like the mommy tiger where my kids are not protected, and there is no one, all the way from my school principal through the governor's office, that's doing anything to protect these kids. And all of the words that are being stated are just mere words. My superintendent's doing nothing. My Board of Education's doing nothing. And I continue to attend Board of Education meetings unmasked in protest of my superintendent and my Board of Education doing nothing to protect these children, and continue to have the children in our school district forcibly masked in school. I am in March, the governor's office says that they are going to rescind mask wearing for children in schools. I continue to go to Board of Education meetings unmasked, and the superintendent of my district states in a January meeting of 2022 that they will arrest anyone who comes to a Board of Education meeting unmasked. And at this point in time, there are Board of Education meetings taking place across the state with people unmasked everywhere. It is online, there's video, it's everywhere, because people know that masks don't work and that it's basically a pointless public policy. And however, our superintendent deliberately is looking at me because they don't like what I'm saying. They don't like the criticism I am launching at them. And what they do is publish something that's specifically targeting me and states that if I come to the next board meeting, I'm going to be arrested. So at the next board meeting, February 14th, 2022, before the meeting even starts, which is not in keeping with what the directive is, but it's before the board meeting starts. And after I filed a federal lawsuit against the Board of Education and the superintendent, stating that they're in violation of my First Amendment rights to publicly protest by not wearing a mask, they have me arrested prior to the start of the meeting. This is my First Amendment right to publicly protest the actions of the superintendent and the actions of the Board of Education. for not doing anything to protect my children and similarly situated children within my district. I am the only parent in New Jersey who was arrested for not wearing a mask in a public meeting, in a public building. And my position is I'll do anything required to stand up for my kids and stand up for what's right. Forcibly masking children, especially children who have special needs and fragile medical needs, is wrong. And then arresting a parent for their First Amendment rights is wrong. And I was told by the arresting officer that yes, she understands I have a constitutional right to be there, and I have a constitutional right to protest. And they were arresting me for a violation of a rule of the building. That's what I was arrested for. The charge was trespassing eventually. But what I was arrested for at the time on video is a violation of a rule of the building, which is not an actual criminal charge.
So then what happened to you? They took you to the police station?
I was taken to the police. I was handcuffed. I was taken to the police station. I was put in a holding cell for over an hour. And I was eventually released on my own recognizance. And to date, we have had no trial, no nothing. My ticket for trespassing keeps getting moved from jurisdiction to jurisdiction around Union County because of multiple judges, officers, you name it, having issues.
So they thought that would put you out of commission. Has it?
No, of course not. Of course not. I've always done the right thing, and I will do the right thing. I started my firm with my partner, Ron Baruti, because our prior firm, where we were both equity partners, didn't want to take on the kinds of cases that we take, challenging, accepting clients that are challenging the constitutionality of COVID vaccine mandates. And our first big case was a challenge against Mayor de Blasio of New York's restaurant mandate for having COVID vaccine cards required to go to a restaurant or a bar or a gym or a Broadway play. How dare they? Did they want to see my vaccination card for polio also? No. It's completely arbitrary and capricious. And we have never seen anything like this in our time in the law. And my partner, Ron, and I decided that this was the time to stand up. We left our old firm. We started our own firm, and we have been taking on all of these types of cases head on. We have represented numerous clients for vaccine mandates, for medical exemptions. We have sued judges. We have sued BlackRock. We have sued numerous entities to stand up to these unconstitutional mandates. And we're taking it beyond just vaccines and just beyond COVID. Every single one of these unconstitutional issues with school boards and schools, and moving further into parental rights, which is absolutely my place. I feel that is very important, taking away parental rights in schools, which started with forcible masking of our children, which started with taking our kids out of school and trying to put kids on a computer to learn, and the emotional damage that's been done to our kids because of that. And just the complete denial of parental rights that began during COVID, with alienating our kids and even adults, with all of the forcible quarantines. Starting there, I think, has been our biggest move towards protecting freedom for people. And these are the cases that our firm is taking. We think it's critically important. I think in 50 years, much like people looked back at what happened during World War II and what predated how Hitler marched through all of the countries of Europe, and what did you do during that time? I said to the school board after my arrest, when I went back to the next meeting, the people that hid Anne Frank were breaking the law. And the people that were trying to capture her and took her and her family to a death camp were following the law. Which side of history are you going to be on in 50 years when we look back at this time? And I think when we look back at this time in 50 years, we're going to really see who was on the right side of history or not, with this same 2020 vision that we look back on now as what occurred prior to and during the events of our last World War. When we look back and say, how could that happen? How did people just sit by? How did trains go through villages of people who did nothing? I think that is exactly right. My great-grandmother came here from Poland. She was an Ashkenazi Jew. She was 14 years old. She had polio as a child. She had a limp, and her family brought her here from Austria-Hungary. It's now Poland. She was brought here. She had nothing with her. Family, friends were who she was brought to. She didn't speak a word of English. And the entirety of her family, 12 siblings and her parents, were killed in the war. And to me, she never got to know 3 of her younger siblings. She never saw any of her family again. And her family prepared her thinking that from what they had heard, only she would be in trouble with what they heard about the Nazis and everyone coming through. They thought, because Anastasia has a limp, they might take her away to a camp of some kind of working camp. And it's not the same with information sharing like we have now with the, how we have instant information with a phone or technology. These are people in a little village hearing information being passed through thousands of miles away. And my great-grandmother's parents thought they were safeguarding their daughter, and they did. They protected her, and everyone in her family was lost. And I think I am fighting every day for those family members that did not survive. A 1-year-old baby, who could possibly take and kill babies and children and old people? It's sickening. But you know what? That's what's happening right now, right here, right out in the open. And we have all the technology to know that. And people are just sitting back and letting it happen. And no one seems to care.
Why do you think that is?
I think that a lot of people are afraid of standing up for the truth. I think a lot of people are very lackadaisical. I think a lot of people can be easily brainwashed. I see what happened in nursing homes with the decisions that were made by those in power, where the majority of people who died of COVID, from the numbers that we have, especially in New York and New Jersey, were older people who died in nursing homes that never stood a fighting chance. It's common sense that you don't mix sick people with well people. That's not rocket science. I mean, I don't have an MD, and I know that. And yet our Aunt Lita, my partner's aunt, died in a nursing home when she was perfectly well because they brought in sick people and mix them with well people in a nursing home. And how are people not up in arms over those decisions? How are those politicians not facing criminal acts? How do we have politicians and government officials and the CDC and everyone who we have this sliding scale of the vaccine, you'll never get COVID, you'll never die of COVID, you can't spread COVID, you can't, and all these things are false. They're all false, and everybody's just okay with it now. No problem.
Given all this, do you have any hope for the future?
I always have hope for the future.
What gives you hope? What do you bank on that gives you hope?
I think every generation wonders about what the future will hold and has their moments of worry for the future. I know, speaking of my own grandparents, that when the Vietnam War protests were going on and the peace protests, I was very close to my maternal grandparents, and they said, they thought they felt very disparaged when that was going on. And yet we moved on and things were okay. And I feel like, again, I just read a book about what was going on during World War I and how children young as 10, 12, 15 were being taken into the military, and how heart-wrenching that was for the mothers losing children that young. So I think every generation feels this despondency of what happens right now. But I look at my kids and I know there's hope for the future because they are bright and they are funny and they are amazing and they ask all the right questions. And I know I am raising them to be upstanding citizens that are going to do the right things. And I know there's other people just like me out there fighting, and they're raising their kids the exact same way. So there is another generation of freedom fighters that are being raised right now, and they will do the right things too. And they will ask all the right questions, and they will hopefully hold people accountable for all of these actions.
I agree. And I personally do place a lot of faith in the people that are doing the right thing. And my experience has been that there's many more people than get airtime than we know about. In all various ways, people are working under the radar to have the proper influence. Gwyneth, I have to say that with your story, you will have immense influence, and it is an enormous privilege to have heard it. And I consider it a special honor to be able to put it on the gallery and let other people hear it. I want to thank you so much for sharing your strength and your personal history. And I want to thank you for your service, not just to the country, but to the next generation. You're going to inspire many parents to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.